Tony, also known as Smoke, was a graffiti artist, or as some would call him, a delinquent. He didn't mind the labels, what mattered was his love for painting the forgotten corners of the city. His favorite places were the quiet, abandoned spots where no one would find his art. Old train yards were perfect for this. The endless line of rusting freight cars provided him with a canvas. Lucas, his close friend, often tagged along, even though he wasn't much of an artist himself. Instead, Lucas usually brought the weed, and together they spent their nights in the silent, forgotten parts of the city, creating art while the world slept. One particular night, Tony and Lucas found themselves by an old railway. The rusty freight cars stretched out before them, untouched by any previous graffiti artists, making Tony giddy with excitement. The night was still young, only a little past PM, and the air was thick with the quiet hum of the distant city. Tony got to work, spraying vibrant colors onto the side of a train car, lost in his craft. Lucas, meanwhile, stood nearby, smoking his joint and watching the stars. After about 15 minutes, Tony had already painted 3 pieces, all perfectly aligned along the train. Proud of his work, he tossed his empty cans behind him, the rattling sound of the metal balls bouncing inside echoing through the night. But then it happened. A loud metallic clang echoed down the tracks. The sound froze Tony and Lucas in their tracks. Tony's heart skipped a beat, and he squinted into the darkness. "Did you hear that?" Lucas whispered, suddenly alert. Tony nodded, the adrenaline starting to course through his veins. It wasn't clear where the sound had come from, whether inside one of the cars or somewhere further down the tracks. Either option sent a chill down his spine. For what felt like an eternity, they stood in complete silence. Then, a noise rang out again, a sharp metal sound. Tony quickly pulled out his phone and started recording. What the hell was that? He whispered into the camera, his voice trembling slightly. Just as he finished his sentence, another sound echoed through the air, paint came clattering toward them. And then, out of nowhere, a voice boomed through the darkness. "You better not trip, boy." Lucas and Tony didn't wait to see who it was. They turned and ran as fast as they could. Behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder. As they bolted down the tracks, the unmistakable bang of a gunshot cracked through the night. Lucas stumbled, almost falling, and Tony's heart pounded even harder. They didn't stop running until they reached a main road, breathless and terrified. When they finally reached Lucas' car, they sat in silence, hands shaking. Tony couldn't believe what had just happened. Reporting it to the police wasn't an option. They had been breaking the law, too. But Tony's mind raced. Who had been out there? Why had they chased them? And why the gunshot? The story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, Tony returned to the tracks. This time, it was daylight, and he was prepared with his Glock hidden inside his jacket. To his surprise, the train was still there, but something was different. His artwork was gone. All 3 pieces he had proudly painted were now covered in ugly blotches of red paint, as if someone had deliberately erased his work. As Tony walked further down the line, he found a train car with its door wide open. Inside was a chair in the center of the floor, with chains and ropes scattered around it. The whole car reeked of bleach, the stench so strong it made his eyes water. Just as he went to take a picture, Tony heard a metallic clanging sound again, further down the train. His blood turned to ice. Without hesitating, he bolted, running faster than he ever had before. He still doesn't know who or what was there that night, but one thing was certain: someone didn't want them there. And whatever they were doing on those tracks, it was something much darker than just graffiti. That chair in the middle of the train car haunted him for days after. Tony hasn't gone back since. He doesn't know if the person who shot at them meant to kill or just scare them, but the fear from that night still lingers. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he can still hear that gunshot echoing in his mind.